we're dealing with the Exodus, so tonight, Exodus chapter 13, and we're going to pick it up in verse 17. And I don't know about you guys, but whenever I've encountered this story, the way that it's always been portrayed is that, God did these miraculous signs or 10 plagues or whatever, and then Pharaoh was kind of beat down, and in his beat down state, he said, okay, get out of here, and the Jews kind of grabbed their belongings and that, and they booked it out of town. They're almost like they're running away, you know what I mean? They're fleeing. But when you really read what the words say, these guys aren't fleeing. And I don't know why we get that interpretation that they are fleeing, because one of the things that we saw last time was that God brought them out as armies. And this is an army in rank that is marching. It's not a bunch of beaten down, scared people that are just fleeing, because I've yet to see any crowd that is fleeing from a disaster get into ranks and orderly march out.
Well, they were making demands on what they were going to take.
Yeah, they were told to go and plunder the Egyptians. Yeah. So look at this. I'm asking you just to change your perspective of this and not look at it as this group of people, and oftentimes we look at them as stupid, uneducated. You're talking about the most advanced civilization in the world. Many of the things that they've done, we still can't figure out today how they did it. So, we're talking about a really, really advanced civilization. And these are the guys that helped build all these things. Okay? So, verse 17, it says, Then it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near or short. Okay? For God said, Lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. Okay, the Philistines, there's your first clue. Who can recall one of the great Philistines that we read about in the Bible? Yeah, old Goliath. So, in other words, God here has already seen the beginning from the end, okay? I'd say to you that in the church, Satan's biggest accomplice as far as keeping Christians or keeping people away from the church are self-righteous Christians. And so often, people come to the church and they think, okay, once I've said that the sinner's prayer and I've accepted the Lord as my Savior. By the way, the sinner's prayer is not mentioned in the Bible. Okay, Jesus never ever did it. Paul doesn't teach on it. It's not in the Old Testament. It's not in the New Testament. That is something that we've made up. It doesn't exist. What the Bible says is that if you believe in your heart and you confess that belief with your mouth, you will be saved. End of story. So the sinner's prayer is man-made junk. But where was I going with that?
Self-righteous Christians.
Yes, self-righteous Christians. Thank you. And so, when people get saved and they step into a church, it's almost like, man, I've arrived. And the poor person that's on the outside looks at that, and the person that's saying, oh, I've arrived, I don't sin anymore. I pray 5 times a day. I do this. I'll do all these things. And the person that's on the outside looking in looks at this guy thinking, I can never ever do that. If I try that, I'm going to fail. Why bother? So that's why I say I think that's Satan's biggest advantage in the church. Once you say the sinner's prayer, if we can call it that, or once you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, that is the beginning point of the journey. It's not the end of the journey. That's where it starts. That's the very, very, very first step in the rest of your life as a Christian. You are not ready until such time as you close your eyes here on earth and you then stand in front of God. Okay?
Always should be a journey.
Yeah, the whole way is a journey, and it's not about the end. Everybody, you talk to Christians and, oh, woe is me, but I'll die one day and then I'll be with the Lord. And well, what about the journey? Jesus said, I've come to give you life and life abundantly. He didn't say, I've come to give you life abundantly one day when you're up in heaven. It starts here. This thing that we're on, this journey, just like these guys here, this is the life lessons, this is preparing you. Now, God did a miraculous thing, and He pulled these guys out of Egypt. But now comes the bigger miracle. And it's the same with you and me. God does a miraculous thing in that on some given day, your eyes were opened and you're like, okay, whoa, this God thing is speaking to me. I don't know much about it, but yeah, I'm going to give my heart to God. Okay? And that is miraculous. The bigger miracle now is getting Egypt out of you. Just like these Jewish people here, they had left Egypt, but they're still full of, they're indoctrinated with all these millions of gods. They're indoctrinated thinking, man, I'm just a slave. This is all their preconceived ideas. This is what they've lived for 400 years. So too with you and me. You grow up being told you're worthless, as a little guy growing up. When you get old, even when you old like me, well, oldish, and in your 50s, you're still going to have that in the back of your head. That's the indoctrination. Now God is saying to me, no, you're fearfully made, you're wonderfully made, I have a plan and a purpose, you are perfect. I'm like, huh? Because it just doesn't gel with what I've been told. So too with these Jews that have been taken out of Egypt, so too with you and me that have been taken out of the world. Now God has got to take the world out of us. So that's what this walk or this journey is about. And as we saw last time, first place they stopped was Tent Town, Sukkoth. That's what it means, Tent Town. And Sukkoth was a little lesson to them, and with God saying, hey guys, this is a journey. You're not going to put down permanent roots. This is not your permanent home. This is Tent Town. It's a temporary thing. Okay, you are going to be a sojourner, a traveler. Jacob summed it up best when he said, I'm a stranger in a strange land. And that's exactly as it should be. I mean, oftentimes stuff will go on, you walk into a room and it's uncomfortable because he's here. No, don't say that. And it's uncomfortable, and this is not our home. We are supposed to be different. So here's this journey. But now here's the thing here. God says to them, God says and declares here, I'm not going to take them the direct route. The direct route would have taken them 10, maybe 11 days. That's a direct route. God says, I'm going to take them the way around, and that round route is going to take a year. Because God says here, if we go through the Philistines, they're going to see war, they're going to go to battle, and when they see war, they're going to get scared, they're going to run back to Egypt. 40 years later, what happens? Do you remember when they got to a year later, when they get to the border, God says to them, send 10 spies in, 10 guys go in, Jacob and Caleb come back and say, man, look at the grapes, the land is flowing with milk and honey. The other 8 guys come back and say, oh, the Philistines, there's giants in the land. And they chicken out. God already saw that, and this was what he was doing. He's preparing them for that battle with the Philistines. Now, most of our minds will go back to David and Goliath. And you think of this one giant encounter. But the giant encounters, if you go through the Bible, happen all the time. Now, for you and me, we're going, giants, really? Go onto the internet and go and look at the archaeological digs, non-Christian digs, where they are digging up skeletal remains of giants. And lots of them. I'm not talking about 1 or 2. I saw another one the other night. There was the head, the skull, because there's a guy in the hole with this head. This head is about that big. It's a big old head. The one femur was 6 foot in length. If you calculate what they said about Goliath, based on the the measurement that they used, the measurement in that day was taken from that top of the little finger there to the elbow, and it was taken by whoever the king was at that time. So if you had a big king, then this measurement was big measurement. If it was a little old king, it was a tiny little measurement. Okay, so it fluctuated. Now Saul was the biggest person in the land. Remember when he got chosen? He was head and shoulders above everybody. He was the biggest dude in the land. So that measurement was big. So, good evening, Shane. So that measurement was big. So the calculation for Goliath is somewhere between, conservatively, 11 foot up to somewhere around about 19 foot. That's a big dude. Now, we know the story of David going up against Goliath, but as you read through the Old Testament, you'll see all those guys who hung out with David ended up becoming giant killers. A bunch of them. They killed dozens of giants. It was commonplace in that land. So later on, when these guys are submitted to God, they kill the giants. God knew it was going to be a problem for them, but at this point, they're scared of the giants, and God's saying, well, you're going to see those giants, you're going to turn around and tuck tail, you're going to run back to Egypt. God saw the beginning from the end. So too with you and me, as we progress along this walk, this journey, our Christian faith, God's going to throw giants in our path. And that giant there is not to shake you up, but it's definitely to test your faith, on the one hand. On the other hand, it will bring you to a point of, Lord, this is a giant, I don't know what to do with it. Help. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a sign of weakness. That there is a sign of strength in that you actually can give it to God. Something that I battle with hugely because I'm like a Mr. Fix-It. If something goes wrong at home, I will fix it. Okay? If something breaks. If something goes wrong, within your life as such, not an article breaking. If something in our life is broken, I will set about fixing it. And more often than not, I shouldn't be trying to fix the thing, because if you can do something in your own strength, it's not of God. And that's why God will allow giants that you cannot fix to come into your life, so that you can turn around at the end of the day and say, okay, well, this is God. And it's those things that then build your faith. And by the time these guys, Joshua and Caleb, by the time they got to the promised land, 40 years later, if you're going to look at Caleb, when he was 85 and he gets his parcel of land, when they get into the promised land, they say to Caleb is my hero in the Bible, but they say to Caleb, you getting your parcel, what do you want? And he says to them, right, I want the mountains up there. Okay. He says, because there's giants up in the mountains, and they're like bread for my soul. Caleb's recognized something. At 85 years old, he's recognized, if I stop fighting the giants, I'm going to get old and die. This is like bread for my soul. And I think that's wonderful. And then, on the other side of it is, Caleb also realized something. He's like, hey, you know what? I like big homes with high ceilings. And all. I go up the giant side. I've got whole cities up there in the mountains. And that's what he does. But that's what God does. I mean, he'll give you a test, a trial. You allow him to take care of it, and you get everything else thrown in. It's just a weird way that he works, okay? So, we in Exodus chapter 13 and verse 17. Or verse 18. So, then verse 18. So God led the people around by the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea. And the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. So these guys are marching. They've got they loaded down with jewels and treasures and everything else. They've been set free miraculously. They've seen God's power. This is important to the story. Verse 19. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him. Remember when Joseph was about to die, Joseph said to the people of Israel, he said to them, when you guys get let out, when God does take you out of this land, because you're prisoners now, you're slaves, but when God does deliver you out, take my bones with you. I don't want to stay back here in Egypt. Not even my bones. I don't want them here. So, for he had placed the children of Israel under solemn oath, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here with you. Verse 20. So they took the journey from Sukkoth, tent town, and now they went and they camped in Etham. Etham now means, it says Etham at the edge of the wilderness. Etham literally means like border town or on the border, okay? So these guys aren't quite in the wilderness yet, as we've come to know. That's another thing that you need to understand about the Old Testament. When the Old Testament says wilderness, it means desert. Okay? When it says desert, it means wilderness. And a wilderness in Old Testament biblical times is a place where there are trees and it's not like a lush jungle, but it has got trees and vegetation. Okay, so you need to switch those phrases around. So now in this walk that they're going on with God, lesson number 1 was, hey, tent town, and now they're on this border. they're about to set foot into this desert region. How often does God allow us to go into a desert region? And there's purpose for it. And sometimes the desert wandering, as with these guys, takes longer than longer than what it should. Sometimes you end up going around and around in a circle. Why? Not because God's been mean. You just haven't learned the lesson yet. Oftentimes at school, when I was a kid, they'd give you tests. And if you passed the test really well, you wouldn't have to rewrite the test every week, on that section. So too with God. Hey, pass the test. And you don't have to sit and write the test every week. So, verse 21. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light. So as to go by day and night. In that desert, in this trip that they're on, in this walk, there are approximately 3, and some estimates will push it right up to about 5 million people, plus cattle and oxen and everything else. This desert area gets up to about 120 degrees. And there's no water. It's hot out there. And the wind that blows, it actually burns your lungs because you're breathing in just pure heat. It really is hot. So you got a whole bunch of people out in this desert wilderness. Hey, how would you get them to move? How would God get them to move? Pretty simple. Puts a cloud over them, right? When he wants them to back up and move, he simply moves the cloud. I'm not going to sit in 120 degrees when there's a cloud and there's a shady spot over there. I'm going to move over and park under the shade. So, so too, then there's this pillar of fire, which is at nighttime. That desert is scorching hot during the day, but at night, it freezes, okay? Now, look at the contrast here. Day, you've got the cloud. Night, you've got this heat, the fire. If you go back and you look at fire in the Bible, it speaks about judgment, the wrath of God. So here's a good way to kind of gauge where you should be going in life. The first thing, if it is peaceful, comfortable, go that route. You're trying to find God's will. That's like I think that's probably the hottest topic in Christian books. God's will for my life, and all these things to find God's will and that kind of thing. But if it's something that's going to bring you peace, if it's something where you're not going to fight it, if it's something that you're not going to have to strive and work at it, but it's a peaceful flow, just go with it. If that's not the right direction, God will move you. Not a problem. But there's a flip side to the coin as well. When you get into God's will and you start flowing with God, He's going to bring the heat as well. And there's many scriptures. It says, whom the Lord loves, He chastises or He disciplines. So that chastising or that disciplining, oftentimes people mistake God's patience and His goodness for apathy. Or they'll even turn around and say, well, I've been doing this for 40 years and God must approve of it. No, if it's contrary to Scripture, He doesn't approve of it. Just because He's been patient with you and He hasn't spanked you yet, doesn't mean that He's not going to spank you. So, when He steps up the heat, that's not God now as being mean to me. It's two sides of the same coin. Okay, you have to accept the heat with the shade. So verse 22. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from before the people. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel that they turn and camp before Pi-hahiroth, and between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal Zephon. Okay, these names here. Pi-hahiroth is caves, and anywhere in that region where you've got caves, you've got bandits, highway robbers, whatever you want to call them. Okay, that's where they hang out in the caves. There were certain routes that you didn't take because of muggings and thieves and that kind of thing, and this is where they stayed in the caves. This next name here, Migdol. Migdol is a tower or a fortress, okay? And then obviously then the sea's on that hand, and then this other place here, Baal Zephon. Baal or Baal, that's one of the gods. Many of you will recognize that. Zephon is a term that they were using, and that's in honor of, do you remember when we were going through the plagues, there was a god Typhoon? When God said to Moses and Aaron, go and take some ashes out of the furnace, and that furnace was dedicated to the god Typhoon, where they burnt humans in, offered human sacrifice to this god Typhoon. So God now is leading these guys, and he says, okay, so on the one hand, you're going to have these cliffs, and when you go and look at it on Google Earth or whatever, it's on the beach, and you kind of come through a low-lying area, and then it kind of opens up on the beach, and there's cliffs all the way along, so it's not like you can run away once you're in there, okay? So you've got these cliffs with the caves, you've got this high area, or this, what do you call it, the tower, fortress, whatever. You've got the sea behind them, and then you've got this opposite Baal Zephon, this place where there's false gods and things like that. If God said to me, okay, this is where I'm going to put you, and that's not the best place to be. I mean, you're boxed in, you're trapped, you don't have a way out. All Pharaoh's got to do is come down that little alleyway. These guys have got nowhere to go. They can go and hide in the caves and take their chances with the bandits. They've got the towers over here, or you swim, take a swim. That's your options. They're all dead. So notice that God leads them to that place. I was saying to you just now, God will allow giants to come into your life. He'll purposely put you into a place where it's difficult. So verse 3. Now God reveals his plan to Moses. He says, for Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are bewildered by the land. The wilderness has closed them in. Pharaoh's going to assume that you guys got mixed up. You've wandered around in the desert for long enough. Now you don't know where you're going, and now you've wandered into this trap, as it were. And now we got you. It's almost like God's putting bait out there. Now remember, I said to you right in the beginning, I said it's not a group of people that are kind of scurrying away, broken down. It's not like they're just fleeing. These guys are marching out, eh? So is it really about Pharaoh? Verse 4. Then I'll harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them, and I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am Yahweh, the Lord. And they did so. So here, basically, God's saying to Moses, hey, this is not about you. This is about me and Pharaoh and the whole of this. Because Egypt at that time was the top of the food chain, if you want to put it that way. They were the rulers of the known world at that time. So God's saying, I'm going to take these guys out, and then everybody, the whole world, will realize I am who I say I am. Okay? Verse 5. Now it was told the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people. Notice that the heart of Pharaoh and his servants. So often you kind of hear the rap, oh man, how come God wiped out all those babies? It was just Pharaoh that was being mean. Surely God should have just taken it out on Pharaoh. But it wasn't. Time and time again it brings up this point. It's Pharaoh and his servants. There was a bunch of these people, the Egyptian people, that were the same mindset as Pharaoh. Hey, we're just going to wipe these guys out, and they've been our slaves. So here, these guys wake up and they realize, our workforce is gone. And I mean, you look, interesting, what were they doing? They were building pyramids. It's like these guys are saying, hey, hold on a second. We're up here on the diamond road, and now, this, what do they call it? That pyramid scheme, Amway. Now all our bottom workers are gone, and let's go get them back in. And and they said, why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? It wasn't just a couple of chapters ago when they were crying out to Pharaoh and saying, hey Pharaoh, let these people go, we're all going to die. Now all of a sudden, it's, hey, hold on a second, why did we do that? That was really dumb. Verse 6, so he made ready his chariot, and he took his people with him. Also he took 600 choice chariots and all the chariots of Egypt, with captains over every one of them. I mentioned this once before. The Egyptian army at this point was the first retained military force in the world. They had a military force that's what they did as their job 24/7. They were a paid military. Okay, The Egyptians are also the first ones ever to invent chariots. So if you look at those chariots and how they were designed, they've got the front of that chariot is huge. If a man stands in the chariot is, the front of it is bigger than him. You can't get to him. And they had cutouts in them that they put spears through. They had blades on the side of them, so they wouldn't actually have to come and fight you. They just run you over and chop you up as they go past. Okay? Now, if you are on the ground and you're trying to fight against something like that, what chance do you have? This was the most sophisticated military might in the world. So here God's saying, okay, you want to trust in your weaponry, in your military force, and everything else. It's on. We'll fight, and this is what's lining up right now. And this is why I said to you, this is not about the Hebrew people. This is about God and the Egyptians. The Hebrew people are just bait. They just happen to be there. That's not fair, you say. But when you give your life to the Lord, if I've given something to God, I've given it to Him. It's His to do with as He pleases. Now, if God chooses to use me and say I come down with cancer, my role is not to turn around and say, oh, woe is me. Why did you do this to me, Lord? That's not my role. My role is to turn around to God and say, okay, what's in this? Why? Not why as I'm complaining, but why? What's the purpose of this? Is this because your intention is to heal me later on and build my faith? Is it because I am going to die, but people watching me are going to look on and say, okay, he's got cancer, but he's still saying, praise God. So it'll build their faith. God's got the right to use each and every one of us that say, okay, Lord, I've given you my life in a way that He sees fit. And if you look at the story of Job, that really emphasizes that point. Because Job initially turns around and he says, well, why me kind of thing? And God hammers him and takes him to task on it. And then later on, Job kind of sees, what's going on in terms of, okay, God's using him. And if you back it right up to the beginning of the story, Satan and God are having a discussion, and God actually says, have you considered my servant Job? Satan didn't go and pick on Job. God volunteered Job. If you go to the dealership and take a car for a test ride, it's not to go and test it to see if it falls apart. The dealership owner is saying, hey, go and take that one for a ride, you'll be impressed. He wants to show the vehicle off. God wanted to show Job off. That was the deal. So when something hits you, it's not God being mean or God allowing Satan to step in. Look at it in the sense of, okay, God's got enough faith in you that He's allowing that to happen to you. Now, God turns around and says that you will not be tempted with anything more than what you can bear. And if it does get more than what you can bear, He will make a way of escape. That way of escape may literally be that if I contract cancer, I'll pass away. That's my way of escape. In that time of facing the giant, that's a good movie, by the way, if ever you want to pick up a good Christian movie, Facing the Giants, should be able to pick it up online. But in that time of facing the giants, there's going to be a lot of people around watching. Remember when David killed Goliath? The whole Israel army saw that and chased the Philistine army and chopped them up afterwards. Okay? That was one little shepherd boy. So here you've got these 600 choice chariots, okay? And now above that you've got all the chariots of Egypt with captains. So the choice chariots is like the Special Forces Division, if you want to call it that, okay? And then you've got the remainder. So we're talking about a big force that's going out. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went out with boldness. Erica, what does your Bible say with boldness?
They left proudly and defiantly.
Okay, proudly and defiantly. That's a good way to put it. I know the old King James says they left high-handed. It's like they were going out kind of, whoa, check at us, we a victory, okay? And like they're boldly and defiantly. That's why I said it's important to understand that these guys they didn't have their head down and they're scurrying out at night. That's not it, okay? They were walking out saying, hey, high five. We won. We've won this battle. That's how they were walking out. Verse 9. So the Egyptians pursued them all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army, and overtook them camping by the sea beside Pi-hahiroth and before Baal-zephon. So here comes this mass army. These guys are in a trap, as it were. Verse 10. Oh, that was the other thing. Don't think of this story in the sense that, okay, so that all the children died, Passover happened, all the children died, and they kind of fled the scene, and now the next day Pharaoh is chasing them down. That's not how it happened. You've got a good couple of days that are going past here, okay? So when Pharaoh chased these guys down, he's got a ways to travel through the desert after them, okay? So in verse 10, when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. Ask yourself something. When these guys lifted their eyes, what did they see? Because, I mean, obviously they were fully aware that here comes the Egyptians, but what did they see? I mean, obviously dust from the chariots. I mean, marching. But what else? Because it says they lifted their eyes. There's a pillar by day, a pillar by night, and a cloud by day. Surely they would have seen that as well. But here's the thing. When they lifted their eyes, they chose to see the dust of Pharaoh. They didn't choose to look at what God was doing right there with them. And that's the same thing with you and me when we're facing a giant and you lift your eyes. You can look at the giant, or you can look at the giant standing behind the giant. There's that story with Gehazi and Elijah. And Gehazi is Elijah's servant. And Elijah's in the tent one day, and Gehazi walks out in the morning, and as he walks out, he looks up, and there's a hill right the way around them. And on the top of the hill, there's chariots, or horsemen, I should say, not chariots, they're horsemen all the way around. And he freaks out. He goes running back in, and he says, Master, we're surrounded, we're going to die, basically. And Elisha gets up, and he walks out, and he has a look, and he sees something totally different. Because he prays at that point, and he says, Lord, please open up the eyes of my servant. And at that point, Gehazi's eyes were opened. It's almost like the scales fell from his eyes. That's what the language is. You remember when Paul was on the road to Damascus, and he went blind, then somebody came and prayed for him. It was like, they said that it was like as if scales fell from his eyes. Okay, now he starts seeing something. He starts seeing into the supernatural. So Gehazi, now that he starts seeing, after this prayer that Elisha offers up, Gehazi looks up, and all of a sudden he's got peace. Why? Because behind every single one of those mounted men that were coming to get him, there was an angel of God standing right behind him. Okay, and that's the point right here. You can lift up your eyes, but you're going to see what you want to focus on. And so often, or more often than not, our past depicts what we're going to see. You're a new creation. That's what the scripture says to us. You're a new creation. You don't have to suck in what's been rammed down your throat for years and years and years. And I speak on experience with this. Okay? You're not who you've been told you are. You're a child of God. So halfway through that verse 10, it says there, so they were afraid, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Notice that? That's what they chose to see, and now fear sets in. What is it that we fear most, or that people fear? Most of the time it's death. You know, in the New Testament it says that one day we're going to look at Satan and we're going to, what? That's what we were scared of. The verse in this, I think it's in the Psalms, it says, where's your sting, O death? And it's almost like a mockery of what you're seeing. I was talking to a chap here today, and he was telling me about one of the guys that live here in the canyon. And years ago, his mom and dad who were driving to San Antonio, and she was in the front of the car with him. You know those metal nail files, the ones with the little hooky thing? She was busy filing the nails, and a car jumped the intersection, and he jammed on the brakes. And as he jammed on brakes, that nail file went up, cut her jugular, and she bled out right there. My point is this: if it's time to go, it's time to go. There's nothing. I mean, if you had an ambulance and everything else right there, you're going to go. And that is, I believe, what the Bible says, where you have your days are numbered. And when God determines, hey, there your number's up, it's up. And when it's not, it's not going to happen, you know. I mean, I remember when I got shot, after I came out, the doctor said to me, he brought the x-rays over and he shows me, and he's showing me where all the pieces traveled. And he says to me, do you realize how lucky you are? He said, if that one piece was just about an inch further back, it would have severed your spine and you would never have had use of your lower half of your body again. This is my pre-Christian days, and I was so arrogant, I suppose I still am, but I turned to him and I said to him, man, that's not lucky. If it had been that much further forward, it would have missed me and would have hit my boss. So, but in everything, I mean, now in hindsight, I look back and I think to myself, man, God had his hand on me there. And if it's not your time, it's not your time. So why do we fear so much? So here, verse 11, they're now crying out, and they're fearful and everything. Verse 11, and they said to Moses, because there are no graves in Egypt, you have taken us away to die in the wilderness. Why have you dealt so with us, to bring us up out of Egypt? What was one of the major things that these guys were building back in Egypt? Tombs. Okay? Graves. That's the Egyptian culture was obsessed with graves and building a grave so that you've got somewhere to go to in the afterlife. And when somebody of importance is dying, man, they'd stick all his servants in there and everything else, and you'd die with him. So these guys now are what? There's no graves? This is what fear does. Fear will make you look at something totally irrationally. And obviously this is what's going on here. So verse 12. Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. That's not what they said. They never made mention of that. Moses came to them right in the get-go. Moses and Aaron came to them and they said to them, hey, this is what God says that he's going to lead us out. They were suffering, right? They turned around and said, yep, there's it, let's go. And they were all on board. Now that it's getting a little bit tough, now they're turning around and they want to turn tail. This is exactly what God said, right? And there's a message in it for you and me. Your Christian walk is not going to be an easy walk. There are going to be giants. And there's a warning here, because when you come across those giants, there's going to be the tendency or the desire to start compromising and say, well, you know what, I won't stand up, I won't speak out, and you'll back off a little bit. But you compromise a little bit today, you're going to compromise more tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and before you know it, your walk is going to be in the gutter. If you don't stand up today, you're never going to stand up. Verse 13, and Moses said to the people, do not be afraid, stand still. Ever seen a chicken with its head cut off and running around? This is what's going on here. These are people now that are consumed by fear. Don't worry about the cloud and the pillar and everything. They are scared. First instruction by Moses is, hey, hold on a second, get a hold of yourself here. Regroup, stand still. And then he says, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. You don't have to do anything. This is God's fight. There's a scripture verse that says that he, God, who began a good work in you, is faithful to bring it to completion. That's a verse that I hold on to dearly, because, man, if I'm going to try and fix myself, good luck with that. It's not my work, it's his work. And then following on after that, it says, for the Egyptians whom you see today, for the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. There's a comforting thought right there. This thing that these guys are willing to trade their faith in for and are running around with like chickens with their heads cut off, This thing that you see that's looming in your life right now that's huge, stand, wait, see what God's going to do. You're not going to see it again. He will take care of it. Okay, that's His promise to us. And that promise is reiterated so many different times in the book of Joshua. Go and have a look at that book. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. That peace is an amazing thing that comes in the Bible. Verse 15, and the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? So obviously here, what it's not saying is once Moses got through saying this to the people, he obviously went and had a word with God, right? And the word that he was having with God wasn't as confident as what he had with the people. And here God is basically telling him, hey, quit your belly aching. Don't come and moan now to me. You said it. What you said is 100% correct. But then he says, tell the children of Israel to go forward. So yes, stand still and allow God to do what He's going to do. Just regroup, as it were. But now you also have to start moving. If somebody is walking, it literally, one finger can change the direction that they're walking in. Lacey, come on quickly. The emphasis was on quickly.
Run.
Come here, just walk slowly with me. Yeah. I'm not pushing you hard, okay? Come here, Lacey.
Pushing you.
Okay, stand still, don't move. Now you don't have to fall over. Yeah, I'm pushing, it's digging into her arm, okay? What I'm saying, thank you. What I'm saying there is, if you're walking with God, even if you're walking in the wrong direction, that's not a problem. Because God will literally just redirect your steps. Just a gentle nudge, and you'll go in the direction that He wants you to go. But if you're sitting down like I am now, man, God's going to be shoving big time. And unfortunately, He's a lot bigger than you and I. And I call that the 2x4 ministry. It's when you're kind of walking or doing what He's not telling you to do, and instead of just getting that little finger, you've got to pull the 2x4 out and redirect your path. That's the 2x4 ministry that He's sometimes got to utilize with the stubborn ones. So God said to him, okay, so quit your belly aching, go and speak to the children. Tell the children of Israel to go forward, but lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. If God gave you that command, what would your response be? And think about it. And God's saying to you, okay, quit your belly aching, tell them to move forward. Oh, and by the way, go and lift up your rod and just divide the sea. We think about, and we talk about Abraham as being the father of faith, right? This guy here has got incredible faith, and you look where he started. Remember when he was in front of the burning bush? Remember all the excuses that he gave God over and over and over again? Look how far he's come. So God tells him here, okay, so you're going to go and lift up your rod and you're going to go and divide the sea, no big deal. And the children of Israel should go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. We want to focus oftentimes on the waters parting. But here's this group of millions of people with all their oxen and everything else. If that ground was a little bit wet, they wouldn't have made it through. There's another huge miracle right there, that the sea floor, the bed, is dry. That sea of reeds thing that they did. Well, later on, when the waters come back and the Egyptians drown, that sea of reeds is just a couple of inches deep, and that's where everybody says, "Oh, that's where the people, went through. They marched through the sea of reeds." Okay, fair enough. I'll give you that. But then that was a huge miracle that this amazing, well-trained Egyptian army drowned in a couple of inches of water. Then you can't have it both ways. It doesn't matter where they went. There was amazing miracles that were being done. Verse 17. And I indeed will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. So I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, his chariots and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gained honor for myself over Pharaoh and his chariots and his horsemen. And the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them. Notice that. That pillar, that cloud, okay, that's the angel of God. This, if you look at this here, you see angel is capitalized. That's whenever you see that, it's called a Christophany. And this is an appearance of Jesus Christ in the Old Testament.
Well, I have a footnote at the bottom that does say the angel of God is associated with the cloud.
Yes. Now, here's the interesting thing. After the birth of Christ, you won't see that term, the angel of God, again in the New Testament. Okay, because then he's here as human form. Right? So that's who we know that is. As I said, it's called a Christophany. If it's a reference to God, anyone, be it the Holy Spirit, Jesus Christ, or God the Father, then it's a theophany. Okay, theo being God. And the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud went from before them and stood behind them. Interesting that if you look at the armor of God that Paul paints that picture of, and he talks about the armor of God, put on the breastplate and the helmet of salvation, all those things, every single one of those pieces will protect your front. There's nothing to protect your rear. And this is what you can go back to. It's God that's got your back, okay? Your position, your role is to simply stand. Or if God's directing you to move forward. Now, in the armor of God,
I'm sorry, I understand that.
now in that armor of God, there are no weapons. Everybody wants to turn around and say, yeah, that sword is an offensive weapon. That's not a weapon. That word sword over there comes from, and if you're looking at the Roman soldier had two swords. He had the broadsword, which is translated as a scimitar, a curved blade. That's what we use, a scimitar. That's the same word that is used for a broadsword. The sword that Paul uses in that analogy is the short sword, or a dagger. Okay? Perfect. And the dagger is not a fighting implement. The dagger is used for personal use. And that was what he says is the word. Okay, the sword, which is the word. So here's the thing. The word here, what is it to be used on? It's not for you to take and go and chop your buddy up with. It's to be used on yourself. Like that short sword. That short sword was to be used for personal hygiene and for yourself to cut a piece of meat. That's what it was for. So the armor of God, there are no offensive weapons. Okay, God's got the battle. It's His battle. And then verse 20. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to the one, and it gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near the other all night. I think that's where we're going to go on Sunday. I'm not too sure. That little verse. I'm not going to expound on that right now. Verse 21, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all night, and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. So the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on the right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. I don't know about you, what sort of waves that you've seen, but when I was working on the beach, we flipped a rescue boat the one day. It's a 16-foot rescue boat, and we were going up. We were literally going up a wave like this. Boat 16 foot, and we were going up, and I was sitting on the nose, to try and keep the nose down. And we got to a point, and I could just feel us, you starting to do this. How big the wave was, I don't know. But it's a it really is terrifying. Man, when that thing threw us over, we got pounded big time. This, what it's talking about here, and these walls of water, it must have been an awesome sight. I mean, you talk about the awesomeness of God. And here you've got dry ground and your walls of water. If you go into look at Joshua when they're going into the promised land, as the priests stepped into the river, that river parted as well, the Jordan. And in those days, the Jordan was just over a mile wide, not little muddy Jordan today. And then again, it backed up for miles. It must have been an awesome sight. You know, you see stuff like that, how can you not say, wow? You know, I mean, as they were walking through that valley with those walls of water, that must have given them an incredible perspective of who God is. And yet, when they got to the other side, they chickened out. There's a word of warning there for us, eh?
When Jamie was on the rig in the North Sea, there's actually a video of a storm that was going on, that the waves were hitting the bottom of the rig that was up. Massive, massive waves. I wanted to say, he said it was something between 60 and 90 feet in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's scary. Just the video alone is scary, let alone being out there for that.
One year we had a cyclone Des Moines pass by off our coast, and a friend of mine, Donovan, he worked on the beach with me, he calls me up, he says, man, the waves are cooking. Play hooky from work, let's go surfing. So I get my surfboard, a little 6-1 board, and we get down there, man, the waves are coming through. And there's a group of guys out the back there, we can see them. So we jump in and we got washed down. Eventually we found a gap and we paddled out, and we get around and paddle around, and we get out there. And when we got there, Sean Thompson, Mike Burness, I mean, these are all world-class surfers, okay? And these guys are on long boards and they've got helmets. There's Donovan and myself on little short boards, not for big surf, right? And we're waiting, and that set came through, and I paddled. I was paddling, and that wave was just picking me up. And at some point I started paddling this way. I got off the back of that wave, I waited for that set to pass by, and then those waves came through. I held that board, I bellied that thing all the way in. Oh man, it was huge. So, yeah, I'm a coward with that. All right, let's pray.